and welcome to LFC Focus. It is pre-match build-up showtime as the Liverpool first team players return from their winter break. It's been 2 weeks since we've seen most of them. We did, of course, have that absolutely fantastic FA Cup tie against Shrewsbury Town, but it is not since that Premier League match 2 Saturdays ago against Southampton that we've seen Liverpool's real first team boys back in action. And of course, they are once again continuing this unstoppable, relentless march towards what will surely, I think it's fair to say, be our 19th Premier League title. And I think it's going to be really, really interesting how the side comes into this game, because of course they have had that long break, and we've seen how the effect of this break can sometimes be detrimental for the players in the past with things like the international break, and sometimes even when the club has been given a break through FA Cup scheduling and stuff like that, and they've gone on the warm weather training camps throughout the winter, and often when they come back they're lacking a little bit of rhythm. And I don't think that's necessarily a poor reflection on those kind of training camps that Jurgen Klopp has brought in the past. I think it is just a matter of when these players aren't playing week in, week out, playing one game every 3 or 4 days, they do lose a little bit of rhythm. And Jurgen Klopp himself in his press conference today, talking ahead of this match, stressed the importance of rhythm. And it seemed like a lot of the training this week had been built around building that up as much as possible, trying to build in intense sessions to get the players into the kind of physical frame where they'll be ready to go into this game at maximum intensity without any sort of let up, and it won't look like they've had any time off. I mean, it is interesting how the clubs handled it as well. We haven't done the warm weather training camp. Other clubs have done. As I said, when Liverpool have been knocked out of the FA Cup early and they've been afforded a 10 or 11 day break at this point in the season in the past, Jurgen Klopp has loved to take the players away as a group. This time they've gone with a different approach. They've allowed the players to separate. I think it's interesting that most of the players haven't really seen it as a break at all. All of them seem to have been in training in some capacity. Some of them have even stayed at Melwood, whether that's because of injury rehab, like in James Milner's case, or just in the case of Mo Salah, he got back as early as he was, I think, possibly allowed to, really. A lot of them have been doing sort of private training abroad. Some of them, like Van Dijk and Wijnaldum, have been, and I think Oxlade-Chamberlain as well, have all been linking up together in Dubai and doing kind of slowed down sessions together and stuff like that. So it looks like the players have really tried to manage themselves as best as they possibly can. And as I said, Jurgen Klopp will have prioritised rhythm here. And I think what's really, really promising is the players look like, and of course I can't say this for sure and will ultimately be vindicated on whether or not this is the case when the game actually kicks off against Norwich, but it looks like they will have retained that rhythm. They'll be coming into this game riding a wave rather than looking a little bit sluggish like they haven't really got going yet. But it will come, you'll get all the benefits of that without the fact that the players will also be suffering from fatigue, and there'll be a lower risk of injuries as well. So I'm very, very excited to see how this winter break turns out. Of course, it's been difficult for us as Liverpool fans. It's been annoying to not have many games. Normally you wouldn't be hugely excited about an away game against Norwich, especially when the Premier League is pretty much wrapped up. But because we haven't seen these guys for 2 weeks, I think all of us, as much as they will be as well, are absolutely raring to go for this one. So team news going into the game. We've had some boosts as well in terms of players returning. Sadio Mane is back after that little injury that kept him out, which is absolutely fantastic news, especially ahead of that game against Atletico Madrid on, I think it's Tuesday night. It kicks off on the 18th, so yes, it is Tuesday night. That is away from home, and I think if we hadn't had Mane, I would have been very, very concerned about that match and how we were going to set up and whether we were going to be able to get goals up against that strong Atletico Madrid defence. But of course, his return is a massive boost. James Milner is back as well. Of course, him as Liverpool's utility man will be incredibly useful. We have needed over, I think, the past few weeks and months a little bit of extra cover at left back and in midfield and even at right back as well that we know James Milner can offer, and we haven't been able to call upon that because of the injury that he sustained right at the start of the year against Sheffield United in that game on the 2nd of January. So it's fantastic to have him back as well. The other massively promising thing is the fact that even the players who weren't injured are coming back a lot fresher, and they aren't playing through the same pain barriers that they were having to force themselves through. You know, Jurgen Klopp said that by the end of around December, January, that kind of period, there wasn't a single player that wasn't playing through some sort of pain barrier, and he highlighted players like Andrew Robertson, who had a really strong pain in his left foot, and obviously there's not much Andrew Robertson can do without his left foot, and it maybe explains why he wasn't quite delivering the same amount of assists, the same attacking input that we could get from him earlier on in the season over the last couple of months. And Jurgen Klopp has spoken about how this little bit of time off has allowed them to overcome those little problems that weren't keeping them out of games, but were maybe shaving just a little 5 or 10% off their games. And, you know, we know how important marginal gains are. It's how Liverpool have got to where they are here. Those little tiny moments that just give you an extra edge have been so important for us over the last, I think, pretty much 2 years now under Jurgen Klopp. And I think having that extra 5% that the players will have gained from this winter break could prove absolutely vital, not just for this Norwich game, but going into this home straight of the season where, of course, we do have at least one eye on a potentially historic treble for Liverpool. So most of the players are coming back fit now. Jurgen Klopp listed the players who aren't available. By the sounds of it, it's only Xherdan Shaqiri, Nathaniel Klein and Paul Glatzel who won't be available, none of whom I think any of us would have really expected to play any part in this game at the weekend, so there's absolutely nothing to worry about there. So as for how I think Liverpool are actually going to line up with their starting 11, I think it is of course going to be Alisson Becker in goal. We don't even need to discuss that. Ahead of him, I think it's going to be Joe Gomez and Virgil van Dijk. They've been absolutely fantastic since Joe Gomez came back into the side, and there is no reason whatsoever to implement any kind of rotation amongst the centre-backs, and the same I think goes for the full-backs. There's always that kind of worry, given how demanding their roles is and their roles are even, and how young they are, and how we don't really have too much reasonably well-qualified backup for them. There's always the worry that they are going to get fatigued and tired, and they're going to pick up injuries, and they're not going to play to the best of their ability. So I think for them, this winter break has been absolutely vital, and I'm sure that they will absolutely come flying out of the blocks better than ever in this little run that we've got now with the games as the season comes to the close. So I'm obviously very, very excited to see them, and I think they're both nailed on to start, barring any last-minute aberrations with injuries and warm-ups and stuff like that. Ahead of them, I think the midfield is going to be an interesting one because of course, before the winter break came around, Fabinho did make his comeback from injury, but his performances were not poor, but they certainly weren't to the same standard, and I think he was a little bit more hit or miss, and it was very, very clear that Jurgen Klopp was managing him back into fitness a lot more carefully than maybe some of us expected. He was making pretty much entirely substitute appearances. I think his only start was that game against Shrewsbury in the FA Cup, where he was probably nowhere near his best, if we're being perfectly honest. I think the reason we were doing that was we were just kind of giving him a little bit of game time, building him back up to match fitness, and then this winter break will have been about getting him back to 100% fitness, essentially, so that when he does come back into the side and he does start starting games again, he is as good as he was at any point over the last season and a half, and he has been absolutely fantastic over the course of his Liverpool career. And I reckon now we're out of the winter break and he's had that extra time and he's sort of synced up with the rest of the squad as well, because even though some of them were more match fit because of the fact they were constantly playing games in comparison to how much football he was getting, everyone's now had the same amount of rest period, so he should be much more in sync with them in terms of his fitness levels and stuff like that. So I think he will probably come back into the side for this game, and then I think either side of him, we probably play it reasonably safe. I think we do go with Jordan Henderson and Gini Wijnaldum. That was the midfield that we really, really settled on towards the end of last season. It was the midfield that I think Jurgen Klopp trusted the most. We have got a fantastic array of options as well in terms of players like Naby Keita being back from injury, Oxlade-Chamberlain hitting some really nice form before we got to the winter break. Lallana has been very dependable, and James Milner is of course returning, and all of those are certainly within a shout of starting in this game. Curtis Jones as well has been absolutely brilliant and played a brilliant game in the FA Cup tie against Shrewsbury as well, so there's no reason to say why he wouldn't start. It's a wonderful, wonderful headache for Jurgen Klopp to have, you know, the sheer amount of options we have in those midfield areas, and the range of options as well. It's not all like for like players. Everyone offers something different, and so I've gone with this midfield because it's the settled midfield, because it's one he's tended to use and trust in the past. But if he's got a particular plan for how he wants to get round this Norwich defence and get the 3 points this weekend, or if he's got a particular plan for the game against Atletico, and that could quite easily inform his selection for this game in terms of trying to manage players' fitness and stuff like that, even though we have had the winter break, then he could make changes, and I wouldn't be surprised to see an Oxlade-Chamberlain or a Naby Keita or an Adam Lallana. But I think coming back from the winter break, just settling everyone in, I think we go with the safe bet, we go with the standard option, we go with it as it comes out the packet, and that is Fabinho, Henderson and Wijnaldum. And then I think we go likewise with the front three. There's absolutely no reason to do anything ridiculous or avant-garde with this one. I think we go straight down the middle and we go with Salah on the right, Mane on the left and Firmino in the centre. So taking a little look at Norwich then, obviously they are the Premier League's bottom side, and while Jurgen Klopp has done his absolute best to try and big them up in his press conference, and of course there are no easy games in this league, if there were, then I think our game against Norwich at the start of the season would be as close to a perfect representation of that kind of match as you would possibly get. The first 40 minutes, certainly, Liverpool ran Norwich absolutely ragged, and it was like men against boys. It was just so easy to get through them. They didn't seem organised. They didn't seem to have a huge plan. I think they've definitely improved since then, and I think looking back on some of their recent performances, while they have been erratic, there have been some good moments for them. I think they try and play good football, and that's one of the reasons Jurgen Klopp praised them. I think he's very impressed with how they've stuck to their guns, they've stuck to their philosophy, and he spoke about how while they do have a plan for the next couple of weeks, the next few games towards the end of the season, they'll also have a plan moving ahead into the years as well, and I think that's maybe why they've tended to stick to their guns, even though it's probably almost guaranteed that they're going to go down, especially if they don't change their ways. The way they're going, they're almost guaranteed to not have another season in the Premier League. The idea seems to be that they can learn from this experience, go back down into the Championship, and then hopefully get promoted again and come back a stronger side. But in the meantime, they have played some nice football. There's a clear plan of how they want to play. They look very, very comfortable in possession as well, and I think that's going to make this game very, very interesting, because even though Norwich are poor, I don't think Liverpool are going to walk over them for 90 minutes. I don't think we're going to have anywhere near like 70, 75% possession or anything like that. I think Norwich will try and take the game to us. There will be moments when we look like we're penned in, and with it being at Carrow Road, there's always the chance that it could be their day. They had this against Man City as well at the start of the season. They did exactly what they've been doing all the way through the season, trying to be attacking, trying to be open, occasionally leaving themselves vulnerable at the back, but doing the best to just score more goals than the opposition at the end of the day. That is how you win football matches, and it very much sums up the way Norwich try and win football matches. And it worked for them against Man City, because it just sometimes things click and sometimes things don't. And that's one of the problems Norwich do have, is finishing is definitely an issue for them. Sometimes they play this brilliant football. I looked at their game against Tottenham Hotspur a couple of weeks ago. They ended up losing it 2-1. They absolutely walked through that Tottenham defence at times. It was fantastic. It was fluid. The kind of stuff that if Liverpool did, you'd be absolutely drooling over it. The difference is we've got Sadio Mane, Firmino, players like that to finish off the chances at the end. And that just isn't quite there for Norwich. They have got Teemu Pukki, and this is another reason why I think if it is their day, they could actually be in with a shout of getting a result, because if they play to the best of their ability and there's the right atmosphere around Carrow Road and Teemu Pukki's on it as well, they will create chances for themselves. That's almost guaranteed. They did it at Anfield as well. They end up scoring a goal even though they're going to lose the game 4-1. If they get those chances and he happens to put them away, then Liverpool have got a serious game on our hands. And that's what I mean about how we can be as so much ridiculously better than Norwich than we can possibly be. But if they start scoring those goals, it ends up becoming a shootout. It ends up becoming, can we score more than you? I'm thinking about games like the draw against Watford a couple seasons back, the 3-3, where it was just end-to-end goals just going in constantly. And it just becomes a matter of, can you finish more of your chances and can you create more chances than they do? I'd rather that didn't happen. I'd rather Norwich had a slightly off day. Teemu Pukki just wasn't really feeling it, didn't bring his shooting boots with him, and Liverpool end up winning the game 3-0. That is an equal possibility. There's every chance that happens, but I would not rule out this game being a lot more difficult than anyone thinks it is, and it being like, if you look back to the title challenge way back in 2014 when we have that 3-2 match against Norwich at Carrow Road towards the end of the season, or even going, to a much more recent game, the game against Newcastle away last season, the 3-2, where of course Liverpool are better than Newcastle, and on the balance of it, we should be winning that game on paper. But there's just something in the air, something happens, the opposition senses that there's a possibility of them getting a result, and they raise their game, they get the goals as a result, and you end up being in a really, really difficult fight for the 3 points. Whatever happens, I think Liverpool are going to win. I think all of us think Liverpool are going to win. That tends to be the attitude that all of us go into every single game with, and this one is absolutely no different. It's the Premier League table toppers against the bottom side. I think you'd be absolutely mad to put money on anything other than a Liverpool win, but do not be surprised if it is a little bit more difficult than I think any of us are really expecting, or at least hoping for, this weekend. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very, very much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, as always, you know what to do. Hit the like button down there. Hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days, weeks and months. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back tomorrow evening after we've hopefully beaten Norwich and got a 25-point lead at the top of the Premier League table. Until then, bye for now.